Good morning, traders. It is 8:02 a.m. Chicago time on Wednesday, the 18th of January, 2023. This is episode number 2394. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. This morning, let's start out with a quick mic check just to make sure I'm tuned right. I'm starting from home today. This morning, we again are confronted with a mixed sentiment this morning. Slightly mildly, very mildly on the bullish side. Crude continues to break out higher, and copper taking off. Those are benefiting from the China reopening trade, as we had discussed. How long was it? About a week and a half ago or so. On the reversal and breakout in crude, the expectation is it would likely push to 77. And if it takes out 77 and stays bid above, we're looking for 80. And then now we're looking for 82 and 83.40 in crude. Those are the key prices that crude is likely to test. And it's doing a good job doing that. Copper's really been climbing. Other metals have been benefiting as well. Gold pushing higher. Last night, the BOJ left rates unchanged. There was a risk that they may change that, but they left the rates unchanged, so there's some relief from that. Great Britain inflation is in line, which is lower than the prior. U.S. PPI was lower than expected. Was much lower than expected actually, but also U.S. retail sales came in worse. That's the main piece. Those are the main pieces on the news this morning. Looking ahead, we have Fed's Bostic at 9 currently speaking. Industrial production at 9:15. Fed's Bullard at 9:30. We have business inventories and NAHB housing market index at 10. Then we have Beige Book at 2. That could be a mover. Fed's Harker's speech at 2 as well. Net long tick flows at 4. Also API crude oil stock change. And then Fed's Logan at 5. And then this evening we have the balanced trade out of Japan. The crude oil numbers have been pushed to Thursday because Monday was a holiday here, and that's what's commonly done. So that's that. The S&P, just from a statistical perspective, the S&P has traded 262,000 contracts, relatively decent compared to yesterday's pre-open. 36.5 points of range, also better than what we saw yesterday, although we ran up yesterday and kind of the market stole the internal gap to settle trade right before we opened, unfortunately. But we have 36.5 points of range so far. The point of control shifting up slightly to 40.14.5, and the range being 39.96 to 40.32 this morning. So we're holding on to that high. We made a high at 35 yesterday, and we're holding on to this area. So this is relatively bullish. Here's what was expected and what we got yesterday. This is from yesterday's Trader Bite. You could see the date up here. Yesterday we looked for the main idea, just as we're closing out the Trader Bite. The main idea is that we're likely to run to the prior settlement and then push to 40.30 right up here, and then I expected it to fall right back towards settlement 40.18, and then potentially push down into 4,000. That's what I was looking for in scenario 1 yesterday. So push higher, fail. So we end up taking out the trend day high from Friday, then fail back to settlement, and then give that up and push to 4,000. And I wrote here potentially pushing to 92 and 89 at some point in the next few days. Didn't quite get there. Here's what the ES did yesterday, just in review. Let's reduce this. This is what it did yesterday. We were here when the trader bite was going on, the settlement price was right up here at 40.18 and a quarter, and right before the open, just a couple minutes before the open, it shot up and tagged that settlement price, taking that trade away. We end up pulling back to 4,009 and then squeezing to 4,035. Remember, I was looking for 40.30-ish in here. So it consolidated in the 40.30 range. We had a very strong reversal, pull back to full session VWAP and mid, and then continuation and break of the IB low. Note that despite the higher low, higher high yesterday, we broke the IB low, not the IB high. There's just a kind of a weakish glimmer of potential selling pressure in the ES. And then for the rest of the session, now it got to, what is it, 4,004, something like that. Couldn't quite get to the 4,000 that I was looking for, but we consolidated for the rest of the session and then sold off into the close. This morning we open, we break that 4,000 that was expected to be tagged yesterday, and then immediately rise up, pull back to full session VWAP, higher high, and then consolidate. Now we're breaking higher. So what we have here is a market that is really in a consolidation, but look at how it's behaving. Okay, so we do get price action wise, we continue to get higher lows, higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. Sure, but as we push into this 40-30 zone, 40-30-35 zone, note that yesterday the profile was B-shaped with the point of control at the lower end of the range. This can be seen as again a very, very early, very weak sign, because it's very early, very weak sign that buyers are not able to hold on to these upper prices. There may be a chance here that we consolidate in this range, maybe even poke yesterday's high and come right back into that 40-20, 40-18 area, which could set us up for another trip down to 39.92, which frankly would be nice because that brings in a little more volatility and gives us a little more opportunity to trade a directional market as opposed to the chop that we've seen for the last couple of days. So this is how it's shaping up. If you look at this in the volume profile, you could see, well, let's expand this chart a little bit. You could see it right here that the spike up was very thin, had very little volume, and then we ended up with a point of control right down into this heavy area right here. So I'm expecting this area here to be a magnet, short-term magnet, maybe squeeze up, push the 40-30, 40-32, and I'm expecting it to find its way back right down into this 40-12, 40-15 area at some point today. I'm seeing more of the same today, most likely, as we did yesterday. We did end up putting in a lower low in the overnight session versus the prior, and so, you know, the key element that we have to consider here is that it is still above the monthly VWAP here. It is still holding on to whatever higher prices it has made. So it has pushed to 40.35 and it's still hanging on to 40.26 currently. So let's not ignore, let's not kind of try to project onto the screen what we want to see, and instead look at what it's doing. And what it's doing is it's had a pretty decent run up. It has tried to sell off a little bit, but it is consolidating near highs. So even if we get a pullback, it is likely to be bought because overall the market is supporting pullbacks because the underlying equity market is relatively strong currently. So if you look at measures like breadth, sector strength, things like that, all these things are indicating that mostly dip buying, which goes in line with the beginning of the year, January. We did not get a Santa Claus rally into the end of the year, and now there's money to be deployed, probably money that was in protection As we consolidated down below in the 3,700 range, that money is now being put to work because that's what fund managers have to do, and that may put a bid under the market and keep this going unless news comes out that tells us that something is dramatically wrong and we need to reprice. That news is not there. PPI today was relatively strong, and the price action is such that any push down is immediately recoiled. But on the short term, we still have a very swift rejection of yesterday's high and a return with a B-shaped profile yesterday. Those are the technical inputs currently, and we do have this kind of magnet underneath us for the ES. So as we look at the bigger picture TPO chart, you can see it here again, just kind of a droopy looking profile and a lot of gravity down below in the 89 range. So my job today in the S&P, my job today is to watch closely how it takes the high and does it stay supported and therefore continue to push and get to the next zone, which is up in the 40-80 area, or does it take out the high and then immediately slip back into the range, consolidate, in which case I'll be looking for it to push back to 4,009. We do have a gap to settle trade here with pretty good distance. We have about 17 points, 16 points to the settlement. So that's the first thing I'm going to be gunning for. So because the expectation coming into the market, the expectation is that the market is likely to move directionally with the overnight trend. The delta has been relatively strong overnight, but if it fails and it starts to rotate below the opening swing low, then I'm going to be looking for a pullback to short into the 4,950 for the gap to settle, and then we move into a neutral posture because that puts us into this kind of fat balance. We need to see what happens next. If it decides to break down and break out of yesterday's low, that ends the one-time framing up, and now we're targeting 39.89 below. So we're looking for 4,000 to be taken and then the 89 to be tested. Now we're back in this and we've rolled over. So if that happens, it creates a little more opportunity in intraday. If it doesn't happen, we are likely to just grind and grind and grind higher. Looking at the NASDAQ real quick, the NASDAQ, pretty good posture. It continues to push up towards that target of, do you remember the target for the NASDAQ? For those of you who NASDAQ every day, 11,800 still hasn't been tagged. This is the equivalent of 39.92 in the S&P. Still hasn't been tagged. Expecting this to come into play. And the NASDAQ is relatively stronger. The NASDAQ is above yesterday's range. And in a gap. So gap rules apply. Gap rules apply, and what we're watching for in the NASDAQ is when we open, do we immediately get responsive selling? Do we immediately get responsive selling? As soon as we open, are people taking profits and therefore selling the NASDAQ? If they are, then we're looking for it to breach the prior range, and then on the pullback we're measuring how closely or how well it's moving out of yesterday's range on the buy side. If it's weak, then we're looking for a short back to 11,625. That's the key trade in the NASDAQ. Otherwise, if the NASDAQ opens in a gap, has a hard time pushing into the prior range, or if it pushes into the prior range and bounces right out of it, then we're looking for a long into, again, the target 11,800 in the NQ. Okay, so pretty straightforward. NQ quite strong now. As you know, China reopens, chips are being delivered, phones are being made, all that good stuff. The NASDAQ is moving pretty well. Quick look at crude, which, by the way, note that crude rolled today. Crude is on CLH3. That is what I'm showing on my screen. CLH3, crude's premium against February is 20 plus 27 cents. It's in contango, plus 27 cents. So adjust your prior levels by plus 27 cents. And crude again is pretty strong, opening in a gap. Very little pullback in crude. Crude dropped about 5 ticks and is pushing higher, is really squeezing upwards. Crude is almost done cleaning up that big selling day. So we had a massive impulse down day. I think it was like 5 or 6% down, and then we ended up having lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. Crude then turned around and gapped up, and then it could not get to the prior high, and then it gapped down again. And this is where the expectation is we would go to 70. But then crude had this breakout day last week, and it took out the 77, which is right here. The 77 comes from here, 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 and so on. This 77 was a key over underline. It took that out and finished strong. And as soon as it did that, then my view on crude has changed, because we have a higher low and now broke the key over underline, and it's pushing higher. So the expectation for crude is 83.45 as the key target up above. Okay, crude is quite bullish. As I said yesterday, shorts in crude need to be light and tight. It's the longs have it, and it's really benefiting from a macro push. Anyway, that's a lot to cover. I gave you the ES trade, the NQ trade, the crude, any push into the prior range, same thing, looking to buy. If it pushes into the prior range, judging the quality of the push, as long as it's not impulsing down or driving down, then the trend is your friend and the trend is bullish. Okay, so hopefully that helps you out. Good luck today. Be sure to hit the like button, and if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you soon. Take care.